Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming to today's Atticus Advantage webinar, Protecting Cash Flow During an Economic Slowdown. My name is Mike Wells. I'm the background organizer on today's presentation. I'd like to introduce you to our facilitator today, Steve Riley. He is an attorney and practice advisor with Atticus. And Steve, I want to thank you for doing today's presentation. This is a critical issue at this time for many attorneys across the country. So I'll let you take the presentation away.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're at in the country. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their practice and life to join us today to talk about this. For some of you that are new to Atticus, I just want to explain who we are and what we do briefly so you can have some context and thinking about where this comes from. Our company was founded almost 30 years ago, and we are the top, I would say probably worldwide, top consulting company for solo and small firm attorneys. And we really help lawyers take their practices to the next level. And one of the things that we have to unfortunately deal with is sometimes we get handed something in our life that creates a cash flow crisis. And our company's dealt with a lot of firms in trouble and a lot of firms in great positions. So we have a lot of different thoughts and approaches with this. We work predominantly with solo and small firm attorneys. Typically, our primary customer or client that we work with are managing partners, owners, and leaders inside those firms. And we have alliances with national associations, everything from software to bar associations, to private associations, to some of the top education organizations in the country, if not the world, when it comes to teaching and sharing things with lawyers. And one of the ways that we provide support to lawyers is through monthly webinars like today, which what we call the Atticus Advantage series, which is free, the Practice Growth series, which is a subscription series. We do half-day workshops, full-day workshops, and probably the heart and soul of our program right now is Practice Growth Program and Dominating Market Group programs. And then we have, for the clients that want this, the ability to work with one of our coaches one-on-one and really work with someone on a more customized, tailored, bespoke approach. And then, of course, we have a tremendous amount of content, some ebooks, some written books. My partner, Mark Powers, is doing a lot of presentations this week on how to prepare your firm for the coronavirus, how to think about certain things, and he keeps recommending one of his books over and over and over again. He says, look, if you have nothing better to do, you can always reread a great book. So he keeps promoting his books, which are The Good Attorneys Become Great Rainmakers, Time Management for Attorneys, and Hire Slow, Fire Fast, which I've been getting the biggest charge on him because Mark is, he and his wife, Sean, who is also one of the founders, wrote these books and have done some terrific work. So it's always great to hear Mark talk about them. So let's focus on today's conversation. And most of you are, Mike, I just want to check in with you. Can you see my screen okay? Mike, are you there? All right. Okay, great. So I can hear you typing, Mike, but I can't hear you speaking. So what I want you to do is think of, I want you as participating. Thank you, Mike. I just want to make sure you guys saw my screen. What I want you to do is write things down for me. If you're at a desk, you're somewhere you can write, or if you're listening to this later, I want you to write the following. Survive to thrive. And one of the themes that I'm trying to share with all of our clients at Atticus right now is survive the next 90 days to thrive. And what I need you to focus on is how to think for the next 90 days to get your firm in a strong position. So I'm arguing right now with all my clients, this is not a week-long event. This is probably not a 30-day long event. This is probably a 90-day event if it's quick, maybe a 6-month event if it's not quick. So I'm trying to get everybody to think first, survive 90 days, and then thrive after 90 days. So first, think about how you survive, then thrive. So stay focused over the next 90 days on marketing your firm, protecting your cash, building your brand despite the current conditions. And after 90 days, you'll be in a great position to do that. And one of the things I've been sharing prolifically is a fantastic quote from Admiral Jim Stockdale. Admiral Jim Stockdale, you can Google this, was the highest ranking officer in the Vietnam War that was in a prisoner of war camp. And he was in a prisoner of war camp, and he was studied by leadership journals and studied by the War College, the Pentagon, and various militaries around the world because he did something extraordinary while he was in the prisoner of war camp. He helped his men that were under his command in the prisoner of war camp have the highest survival rate ever while being in a prisoner of war camp. And when he was interviewed and studied for this, the question was, hey, Admiral, was it because you're an optimist? He said, no, optimists died quickly. The optimists died first because they died of a broken heart. They think they'd be out by spring, and they weren't, and so they would die because they gave up. Pessimist. So obviously, then if you're not an optimist, you're a pessimist. No. Pessimists died just as quick. They were fatalistic. What he did was create a paradox, which is now commonly called the Stockdale Paradox. He said you had to have two beliefs equally true and hold those two beliefs while they're contradictory as true in your mind in order to get through a terrible experience in your life. So I want to share this with you. I'm going to let you write this down, or you can take a screenshot of it, or you can take a picture with your phone, or you can re-listen to this presentation later and capture it, or you can just Google it, whatever way you want. But I'm going to read the quote to you. You must never confuse the faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be. Fantastic concept, fantastic place where to stand. So everybody on the call, everyone on the call is a attorney or a team leader or a practitioner in some way, shape, or form. And what I'm trying to get you to believe or look at and adopt is this paradox that you must know that you have the faith that you're going to prevail through this crisis and not give up on that faith, while at the same time confronting the brutal facts of where you're at today. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the brutal facts, but with the confidence and faith that we're going to prevail in the end. Now, to survive, we have to do certain things. First, we must survive. And I want you to think about protecting yourself first, your team, and your cash flow. And these are some of the things that we're recommending to all of our clients throughout our entire client base right now. But protect yourself, your team, and your cash flow. Keep production moving. Try and maintain schedules virtually. Some of you are dealing with shelter-in-place orders. Some are not. Florida is a hodgepodge of shelter-in-places, whereas around the country, a lot of states have just shut down. Some of my friends basically in Idaho basically said they were shut down yesterday during a conference call. So we are seeing this all around, and then we're interpreting what that means, shelter in place, as a law from an essential service as a non-essential service. And depending on how you read some orders, they are essential services. So, we have to keep production moving to take care of our clients and customers during this time period. So first, we got to figure out how to survive. Now, today, I'm going to walk you through a process. This is a process that I created 6 or 7 years ago, and it's really how to survive a cash flow crisis. And I'm going to walk you through a couple steps, but I'm only going to focus on 2 or 3 elements, 2 or 3 of the most critical elements that I can share with you today. So step 1 in dealing with cash flow crisis is to confront the brutal truth. What's the truth? What are we dealing with financially? What are we going to do? Step 2 is taking a financial snapshot, which we'll work through. 3 is really understanding the vicious cycle of the cash flow crisis, which I'm going to share with you a little bit about. Talking to you about protecting your cash flow, recommending some focusing strategies, because there's nothing that freaks you out more than a terrible cash flow crisis. Protecting the golden goose, which ultimately is going to be you. The team, putting together advisors or coaches to help coach you and keep you accountable through the process. Using a team management approach, communicating what your plan to your team, and then having a creditor's game plan, how to talk, who to pay, when to pay, and how to talk to them. And then when things are going good, or as you're working through this, what are some cash flow acceleration strategies to collect money faster? I'm not going to be able to hit all of those. I'm going to do my best to hit some of the critical elements at this point in time. And if it becomes more relevant to everyone else, I can do other webinars in the future on some of these other topics. But right now, I'm just going to hit on some of the critical ones from my viewpoint. Number one that we're going to talk about right now is protecting the golden goose. Well, who is the golden goose? In your practice, that's you. Without you, everything goes, and we have to take care of you. And if we don't take care of you, then the crisis is going to get worse. So you have to look out for yourself here. And I've written 3 ways that I've seen lawyers kill their golden goose, basically kill themselves in this process. One is allowing the crisis to consume you, having no time off, no exercise, and no boundaries. During a crisis like this, you must take time off, you must stop working, you must exercise, you must eat right, and you must take care of yourself, because that's when we need your judgment the best, during a crisis. So you have to take good care of yourself. If not, you have to take better care of yourself now than you ever have. So if you think working 7 days a week is going to solve the crisis, it's not. You're never going to work yourself out of a crisis, but you'll think yourself out of a crisis. You can never outwork a crisis. You can only think yourself out of a crisis. And the more that you're rested, the more that you've taken care of yourself, the more that you've exercised, the more that you've provided your body with good nutrition and good sleep, the better chances you have of thinking your way through the problem. You'll never be able to outwork a crisis, never. It's never worked for anyone. The crises that I've had in my life, I've never outworked them. I worked through them, but I had to protect myself and had to take time off to recover, rejuvenate, and rest. 2, you're highly stressed, so your brain's going to respond as if you're in chronic attack. So if you're under chronic attack, you have to, once again, protect your brain, protect yourself, and get breaks. And 3, what we have a tendency to do during this time period is neglect the health and importance of our most critical relationships. And neglecting and taking advantage of our most critical relationships starts to become normal during the crisis. And what you end up doing is, for some of us, we'll go through a crisis but end up getting divorced, or going through a crisis and end up being alienating our children, or alienating our team, or alienating people close to us. So you have to protect yourself so you don't hurt other people, hurt yourself, or cause any type of chronic stress problems to yourself. So protect yourself. Change is a process, my friends. It is not an event. And in this particular crisis, it's distinct from 9/11. It's distinct from the real estate and crisis crash that a lot of us lived through. This is a process, and it is a change process. It is a pandemic. It is not an event. So you have to approach this mentally like it's a marathon versus a sprint. You're not going to run to the end very quickly. You're going to have to get up every day and work through this. You're going to have to be a strong leader. You're going to have to be a strong leader to your family, a strong leader to your team, a strong leader to your community. And you can't do that if you're not taking good care of yourself. So you must protect yourself as much as possible. Exercise, eat right, meditate, whatever spiritual practice you have. Don't cut corners for your health. Otherwise, you're going to rob yourself of what you need the most to get through this crisis, which is going to be a healthy brain and good judgment. I'm going to recommend you create time boundaries around your work, which is very difficult because a lot of us are practicing from home now. So I'm going to suggest that you just create time boundaries. I'm not going to work past X, meaning I won't work past so long, and I won't start working before Y. For me, my wife and I have agreed that she works from home too now, and we've agreed that we don't work past 8 p.m., which meaning, let me rephrase that, we don't work past 6, but we don't talk about any work-related activities past 8 p.m. So from 6 to 8, if something comes up, that's fine, we talk about it, but we try and stop working at 6. And I try not to start working before 8:30, and some days 9:30 before exercise. I want to make sure that I have time with my family, who are also working from home. One's in university, one's in high school. I also got to make sure I have time with my team and whoever I need to help me stay accountable to work through this process. So make sure, first and foremost, if you're going to have a cash flow crisis or you're dealing with a cash flow crisis and you're worried about it, the first thing you have to do is protect the golden goose. That's you. Number two, I want to spend a few minutes and walk through the viciousness of a cash flow crisis so you can understand where you're at. So if you're following along with the screen, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. So if you want to watch this later, you can. Each one of these would probably require a significant amount of discussion just so you can appreciate it. But I'm going to hit each one quickly from a highlight perspective, just so you can get a sense of it. You can always come back and dig into this a little deeper later if you want. And then I'm going to move to my next topic and hit that pretty hard. So the viciousness of a cash flow crisis. So I have a diagram up on the screen, and it basically is a vicious cycle. Anyone that's gone through a cash flow crisis, anyone that I've coached through a cash flow crisis, anyone that I've helped through a cash flow crisis seems to go through these 5 steps. And I'm going to go through each step briefly, then I'm going to take them apart briefly, and then I'm going to take you to the next stage. So from my viewpoint, you first have what we'll call the cash flow crunch. And then from there, you have a confidence crisis. And the confidence crisis is insidious because it's invisible. You don't see it. Then we have what we call chasing the cash flow treadmill, which we chase about any darn case that comes in the door. And then what you do is contract your marketing, both because you're ashamed of your crisis, you don't have cash, and you're too busy getting work out the door. And then what you do is shrink your future. And the more you shrink your future, the more it causes a bigger cash flow crunch, and more that impacts your confidence. And the more you chase cash, and the more you contract your marketing, and the more you shrink your future. So it is a vicious cycle. I've seen this over and over and over. But it's also probably the most unique time to learn about your practice, because you can look and see, why did this happen? How can I stop? How can I stop it from occurring? How can I find new opportunities? Who are my friends? Who are my best clients? And who are my all-star staff? And what is my practice trying to tell me? Why am I in this cash flow crisis? Now, over the past 3 or 4 days, I've had coaching clients of our company where we've worked through their finances and they're good for 4 months. I've worked for some where they're good for 4 days. And why is that? Why is it? Why are some good for 4 months? Why are some good for 4 days? It has everything to do with the strategic planning of the lawyer, the financial practices of the lawyer, how the lawyer has priced their services, some of the processes and systems that the lawyers have. So as you go through this, don't miss the learning process, because when you do have a cash flow crisis, you basically go into the uh-oh phase, and you try and figure out what's going on. I mean, and you're trying to figure out, why is the cash flow crunch here? And obviously, it's easy at this moment in life to say, you know, it's because of the pandemic and I've stopped. Well, it may be that it's because of the pandemic, and you also have weak referral sources, and your marketing soft, and you didn't have a war chest, and you didn't have a line of credit, and you didn't save money for profits, and you've been kind of practicing and living hand to mouth, and you haven't really been selecting great clients, and you haven't really done a great job managing your team, and you've got kind of a messy practice. And those practices that are shaky are really going to get tested very hard right now. So when you're at a cash flow crunch, look for the reasons why you're in a shaky practice, because that's really what you're going to work on once you survive and then build to thrive. The next level is the confidence crisis. I'm just going to talk about this for a minute. During great times, your confidence is high. And I would say, as of 30 days ago, we had probably the best economy I've ever seen in my adult life. The lowest unemployment in 50 years. We've had finding people may be very difficult for most lawyers. Hiring lawyers, hiring associates was very difficult. Hiring good paralegals was almost impossible. And over the past year to 2 years, any lawyer that I talked to, they basically were really cocky. Nothing bothered them. All their problems were easy. Life is good. They are the greatest thing in the world, and they're smart. They're the smartest people you've ever met. You just ask them, they'll tell you. But during a crisis, your confidence gets depleted. You get scared. Every little thing becomes a big crisis, becomes a big problem. You become emotionally raw and you're stressed. Your heart may not be in it. And if you don't protect yourself, you're going to get more and more exhausted. And as a result of this, this cancerous state puts you into a mental state where every issue is an issue. Every small crisis you deal with will magnify to become a big crisis. You'll start to cut corners everywhere. You won't communicate with people. You'll start to evade creditors and say things like, take a message, instead of taking the phone call saying, here's what's going on. I'll try and pay you in 90 days. I'll try and pay you in 6 months, or let me pay you in small increments, or I have no money to pay you now, but call me in 30 days, versus trying to avoid them. And as a result of this, the people that are around you that are trying to support you, you punish. And your confidence crisis starts to then spill over onto your staff, your spouses. Oh my gosh, your clients and referral sources starts to spill all over the place. Your temper gets quick. Your staff tries to find ways to avoid you. They may not be straight with you and tell you the truth because they're afraid you'll blow up and get mad at them. They'll start to call in sick. They'll use email more rather than talk to you face to face. They'll be on the side updating their resumes, and you'll make the mistake of sharing way too much with them about stuff they don't need to know because you're stressed, you're not sure what to do. And then over that time period, what happens is your stress escalates, you work longer and harder, you don't take good care of yourself, communications break down, you'll start to become really, really slippery on promises. Your temper will get quick, and you will talk without thinking. And as a result of that, you will just enhance this whole cycle, and it will just move to the next stage and get worse and worse and worse. And when you're in crisis, the next thing you'll do is chase the next dollar, and you're going to sacrifice a lot in doing this. So you may do real estate work. I mean, you may be an estate planner, or you may be a family law lawyer. Whatever the case may be, but you'll start to cut corners and take anything that walks in the door if they've got a check. And once you start doing that, you start to add more pressure onto you, more pressure onto the system. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do this. I'm just making you sure you're aware of what's going to happen, because you'll take your focus off the things that you probably need to focus on because you'll be chasing the next dollar. And then consequently, because you have more work in the door, while it's not high-paying work or profitable work, the technician, the lawyer in you will take over. Any marketing plans will go out the window. You'll make the mistaken assumption to stop marketing and just work on cash flow. There has to be a balance during a cash flow crisis between marketing and business development. You have to keep marketing. My business partner, Mark Powers, has a slogan. He says, never, 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 never stop marketing. And in this case, I don't care if 90% of the time you're working on production, but at least 10% of the time you've got to be marketing, trying to get cases in. And if you don't, what's going to happen, you're going to contract your marketing. And once you contract the marketing, then future quality cases, high quality clients stop coming in the door, which only further compounds the viciousness of a cash flow crisis. So you have to keep marketing during a cash flow crisis. If you don't, then you start to shrink your future. Your future becomes smaller, your goals become smaller, your life becomes smaller, and the pain of your current experience just basically limits your future. And if you have 6 people now and you're down to 2 as a result of this, then you end up going, good Lord, I think I'll never have more than 2 employees ever again because I can't handle 6. No, you got hit with a crisis. You got hit with a pandemic. You're not a bad person. You're not a bad lawyer. You just got kicked in the teeth. So really the quality of your life is going to be determined by not shrinking it by how quick, but by how quickly you get up, appreciate the fact that you've got to learn from this experience, and go back to work. And that's really the payoff for me. The hidden payoff of a cash flow crisis is usually threefold. Number one, you get lean and figure out what you really need. You figure out, okay, what do I actually have and need to work to make a living and to run my practice? 2, you learn the business at a whole different level because you learn what you actually need. You learn how to talk to people differently. And in many cases, you discover a breakthrough that will redefine your firm. If you keep doing the work, you will find a breakthrough that will redefine your firm. And that's the one really amazing thing about this, is that when you come out of this, you're a stronger human being, you have a stronger practice, and typically you're going to be a lot more innovative and a lot more quicker to notice opportunity and how to improve processes than you were before. So while it looks terrible as you're going through it and it's painful, my experience is anyone who comes out the other side with a greater level of courage, a greater level of strength, a greater level of understanding, and a greater level of thinking. So I reviewed that because over the next 30, 60, 90 days, you may have to come back and listen to that cycle again, just to figure out where you're at and say, where am I in this cycle? Where am I? And how do I get off the vicious cycle of a cash flow crisis? Where am I? So great. I'm going to move to my next topic, which is really probably where I'm going to spend a considerable period of time, which is protecting your current cash flow and protecting your current financial position. So these are the average assets of an estate planning or family law or any type of law practice, probably with the exception of maybe a plaintiff's practice, which might look a little differently at. So what you do is when you're looking at the assets of the firm, and as you go along or when you want to listen to this later, I want you to think about, what do you have available in your lines of credit? What do you have available on your business credit cards? What do you have available today on cash on hand? What do you have available that's in your accounts receivable outstanding? What do you have as available as accounts receivable in the trust account work that's in process that you haven't billed yet? And then what do you have in actual work in process? What do you have that's in inventory on your desk or on your team's desk that sometimes is needs to be collected, or in some cases may have already been paid for, but it's kind of a liability because you got to do the work. So one of the things I'm going to suggest that you do after this webinar is to go through and do a quick asset assessment, an asset test, so to speak, of your assets. And that's the first place I'm going to tell you to go. See what you have available for lines of credit, see what you have available on credit with your credit cards, see what you have available on cash on hand, your accounts receivables, both outstanding with clients, accounts receivables and trust, and WIPP. Now your work in process, which I'll keep using the acronym WIPP. And I'm going to spend a few more minutes with the WIPP in a minute to take that apart. So let's talk about WIPP for a second. When you look at your work in process, I'm going to recommend that you triage it 4 ways. 1, cases that need immediate attention due to any type of statute of limitations or pending deadlines. So if you've got a hearing or trial or something like that, depending on what the status is of your state court system. I'm in Florida. I'm a Florida attorney. So right now in Florida, we are, as of this date, able to do emergency hearings that are truly emergency hearings, and those have to be done via video or via webinar. Via video conference or via teleconference. I was talking to a special magistrate yesterday, and she's doing it via Zoom. So she's doing hearings via Zoom that are emergency hearings and emergency hearings only. The Justice Kennedy of the Florida Supreme Court has issued an order that basically I think all the trial lawyers and everyone that does criminal work, plaintiff's work, any form of litigation is waiting to see when the courthouse is going to open for business. So we don't know. Obviously, but to the extent that they have to file things, they're trying to figure out how to protect statute of limitations, they need to do that first. 2 is I want you to look at cases that drive cash right away. What are cases in your pipeline that are, driving cash right away? Word on the street is that in plaintiff firms, the insurance companies are still settling cases. Cases are still settling and cases are still getting resolved. So don't think that because the pandemic is bringing somewhat of the world to a halt, the cases aren't getting resolved. The positive side is some cases are still getting resolved. Things are still getting done. 3rd is cases that'll need attention in the next 30 days to 6 weeks for whatever reason. And then last but not least, cases that will be put on the back burner for now. And then what I would do is kind of attach a value to that work in process. Because as we look at this, I need you to do a little bit of a financial analysis, which I'll show you in a moment. The next thing I want you to do is assess your essential and non-essential expenses. And to the extent that you can reduce non-essential expenses, do so. So non-essential expenses might be networking groups that you belong to that have not been that productive. It might be quit being a member of the Chamber of Commerce. It might be online advertising campaigns that aren't working. Anything that's not giving you a decent net at this moment in time or decent revenue. 2, I'm going to recommend you preserve cash, and I'm going to recommend something that may be a little controversial. So I'm just going to explain it. And then if you disagree with it, please don't send me an email and tell me that you disagree with it. Just don't do it. If you disagree with it, just don't do it. I don't need to know you disagree or you're not going to do it. It doesn't bother me one way or the other if you do it or don't do it. I'm just giving you the advice. My advice is that if you have a company line of credit, a personal line of credit, a law firm line of credit, any form of line of credit right now, hit it. And hit it to the maximum amount that you possibly can. Take the cash, pull the cash, and put it into a separate account out of the bank that you just borrowed the money from. Why am I telling you to do this? Well, because if this is a 90-day process or a 6-month process, you need as much cash as you possibly can. And banks are finicky and fussy. Some banks are stepping up and trying to help their customers. Other banks are yanking lines of credit, killing loan deals left and right, and pulling back on any form of cash and credit available to their customers. In the past 48 hours to 72 hours, I've seen, based on my own client base, one residential deal as of closing get canceled because the bank canceled the funding. I saw a commercial deal, which was the loan to value was like 50%, which means there's 50% equity in a very significant commercial building, having the bank decide not to refinance that building at that point in time. I'm aware of lines of credit being canceled or yanked, or at least slowed down tremendously. So the problem with the line of credit, you may be thinking, Steve, I'm good. I don't need the cash right now. If you think you're going to need the cash in 3 months or 6 months, my recommendation is to hit it now, because you can always pay it back in 3 to 6 months if you don't need it. 3, prepare an austerity plan in the event of a long-term slowdown. And I can talk a little bit about what that means in a moment. 4, start thinking about reviewing your cash flow projection twice a week. Whether you're with a team or whether you're a solo by yourself working out of your house, or just a cell phone and laptop, I want you to be on top of your cash flow twice a week. And last but not least, prioritize your billing against your trust accounts. I usually go big dollars first. What I mean by that is if I've got 6 matters that I can bill against in my trust account, I go after the one that's got the most dollars first and prioritize it that way. So biggest dollars first. It's contrary to how most of us think as lawyers. We usually think in terms of calendar. I usually think in the terms of cash flow. So prioritize it based on dollars first. Good. So that's some recommendations. What I'd like to do is take you now to a little bit of math. Now, my joke is most of us went to law school. I know I did, to avoid 2 things. Number 1 is math. And number 2 is anybody who might be in sales or marketing, which of course is ironic because the most important thing I need to learn as a lawyer is sales and marketing and math. So there's life for you, right? So here's your financial, what we consider a financial cushion. And this is going to really depend on your ability to assess your financial capabilities to operate in the future. So I need you to just do a little math, and you're going to do this. If you have to come back and look at this webinar later, that's totally fine, because I'm going to go through it quickly, and I'm going to walk through 2 examples. I'm walk through a family law practice and walk through an estate planning practice on how to consider this. So number 1, I need you to go through calculating all the funds in your operating account after looking at essential expenses being paid. That's your first number. Then I want you to add the funds in your emergency account that you basically can count. Some of us are using what we call profit first accounts from the wonderful book Profit First. Some of our clients are doing war chest accounts, which we strongly recommend it for marketing. And of course, payroll and tax accounts. So I want you to look at your funds for your emergency accounts and see what you have available. I'm not recommending that you take your payroll tax deposits in this calculation, but I want you to be aware of them so you can at least make sure you get that paid timely. 3, funds that can be immediately earned out of your trust account. So we just talked about that briefly a moment ago, like how to prioritize that, figure that out. And then funds available through lines of credit. And if you can, your credit cards, you can take an advance on your credit card if you can pay things on your credit card on certain expenses, and do that because that's basically like a line of credit. Take those 4 numbers and add it up. So those 4 numbers are really your working cash, your financial cushion to get you through the next 90 days. Now, I'm saying the next 90 days because depending on your practice, you may not be getting any new clients in for the next 90 days. Some lawyers are really slammed right now because they have clients that need things and they're getting work done. Other lawyers are sitting around. One of my colleagues said he had a scotch and a cigar the other night with a criminal law lawyer because the courthouse closed and neither one of them had anything better to do, so they decided to hang out, have a scotch and a cigar. I guess it's a marketing event, but it totally works for them. But it really depends where you're at with your new clients coming in the door. So you have to make a determination. Do you see new clients coming in the door? One of my friends I talked to this morning, he says over the next 30 days, he sees 2 new clients on his calendar versus typically seeing somewhere between 10 to 15 a week. He's looking at 2 over a 4-week period. So you have to look at that and make a determination where does that play out as towards your expenses over the next 90 days. Now, calculating WIPP is kind of dicey sometimes. So I did a couple of things to think. I did 2 examples here to kind of think about for examples. This is an example of calculating WIPP in a family law practice. For those of you who are following along on your screen, hopefully this is up and you can see it. So one of the things in Atticus that we always measure is what is your average revenue per case. So what that we mean by that is if you've got 100 matters in a year and your gross revenue is X, then divide X by 100 and that tells you what your average revenue per case is. Different matters will drive different revenue, obviously. In this case, this is a family law firm, and this particular practice may do simple divorces, complex divorces where there might be a lot of litigations and assets at issues, might do prenup work, might manage custody disputes, might do some adoptions if applicable for that type of case, and might deal with some spousal maintenance issues. So this is kind of a snapshot of the types of cases this firm might be handling. Currently, they have 25 cases in process. That's a mix. They have their average revenue per case is typically 15 grand. So I know in this firm, if I've got 25 cases in my pipeline, I roughly may have the assumption that I have $375,000 in revenue in my pipeline. So this is kind of an estimate. This is where you say, Steve, I can't figure out my WIPP because it's too complicated. I got too many cases. I got too much going on. My practice is too big. I'm going to recommend that you do something to look at that and figure that WIPP out because we need you to wrap your brain around it in some way, shape, or form. The second one is really WIPP for a family law practice, an estate planning practice. And once again, this is an estate planning firm, and I'm going to recommend in this calculation, they look at estate planning prospects calendar because the one thing that I can tell you right now, whether you're an elder law or an estate planning attorney, if someone's on your calendar, they're a serious buyer. I mean, anyone that's either violating a shelter-in-place order or is coming out during a pandemic is serious. This is not a tire kicker. They're coming to see you because they're really serious about getting this taken care So you want to probably calculate them in your WIPP. Two, you want to look at your estate planning and process, consider your basic and complex, any probate, guardianship, or trust administration work that you have. If you've got elder law work in there, by all means do that. But I'm just kind of giving you an example so you can calculate your WIPP, or think about how to calculate WIPP. So in this case, if I've got a firm, an estate planning firm where their average revenue per case is $7,500, they've got 30 cases in the pipeline, so I know probably 225. Both of these cases, the firms are pretty comfortable. I'm looking at this based on their WIPP. As long as they can process a WIPP and collect the WIPP, assuming money's in trust, they're good. So when I do my financial cushion with this firm, I would be able to go, okay, great. I've got funds in operating after essential expenses. I've got funds in my emergency profit account war chest to calculate. I've got my funds that can be immediately earned out of trust. I got funds available through any credit, and I have my WIPP. If I pull all those numbers together, I should have a decent financial projection of what I'm working with for the next 3 to 6 months as a rough rule of thumb. Now, for those of you with accounting degrees, those of you LLM and tax, you're probably like rolling your eyes and making all kinds of facial gestures. Look, here's how I look at this. I just need a rough rule of thumb of what I'm working with in my cash flow crisis. I am not filing a tax return to the IRS. I'm just trying to survive for 90 days to 6 months. So this doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to be close to beautiful. It has to be close enough that I can make a good decision about what I'm going to talk about next. So let's talk about the third or fourth issue that we need to wrestle with on this particular call. Your team. Most of you will want and need to preserve your team during this time. And most of you are either looking at furloughing, letting people go, borrowing money, trying to negotiate your lease or negotiate your mortgage, negotiate funds from the bank, whatever the case may be. But a lot of that depends on where you're at right now. And I have 3 models for you to consider. Look, model 1 is an austerity plan. And if your financial cushion can cover 3 months, you've got a lot of WIPP, and your new client inquires for study, and you know that you're strong, you may want to draw down on your line of credit, eliminate some non-essential expenses, and put off any purchase and wait it out. You're probably in a really good shape right now. Downsizing model 2, your financial cushion's not great. Your WIPP is probably half full, meaning that it probably gets us 30 to 45 days. You're probably overstaffed, unable to reduce some of your costs and fixed costs substantially. You're going to basically feel some pressure on you personally. You're going to probably have to reduce loans. You may have to put capital in. You may have to seek some loans to get the firm operating. You're definitely going to select some team members that are going to be put on furlough or negotiate pay cuts for members of the team. And then third model, which is probably the worst of the 3, level 3 austerity model, as I've been nicknaming it, is your financial cushion is non-existent. You probably can't qualify for loans. You don't have a lot of money in WIPP. You got no money in trust, and you're in a tough position where you can't negotiate any fixed costs or variable costs to negotiate things down. In this case, you're looking at a really tough time. You're going to forego some salary. You may have to put money into the firm to keep it afloat. You may have to seek loans, and you may have to furlough and go down to a skeleton staff. This is why the calculation around your financial cushion is so critical, because a lot of you are trying to make decisions about what to do with your team. And I can't help you until you do the math. You have to do the math and figure out where are you at? Can you make it 30 days or can you make it 3 days? If you can only make it 3 days, then we're going to go to model 3, which is an austerity plan that is pretty drastic and very, very draconian. If you're like, no, I got 90 days, and that's totally fine. You want to preserve your team, that's completely fine and completely appropriate. It's completely your call, but you can't make the decision about your team typically until you make the decision about where you're at financially. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 tips that I've experienced and things that are happening in real time as we're going through the next 15 minutes of this presentation. Number 1, getting help from your banker. Some banks, in this case, one of my lawyer clients, sent me an email saying that he got an email from his private banker at SunTrust saying right now, if you're a client of SunTrust, we'll loan you up to $50,000 payable. And this, I just cut and pasted the email. Up to $50,000 repaid over 60 months with payments not beginning until month 13 or 60, fixed at prime with no fee. If you're interested, just let me know. And this is the private banker. All we need is an affidavit and a brief description about how your business has been affected and what the funds are going to be used for. Goodness gracious. You know, I've never been a big fan of SunTrust, but after reading this, I'm suddenly telling my wife and my team, I think we're going to move to SunTrust because they're trying to step up to help their business customers. Now, this guy who sent me this may be in a very strong position, and he may not need the 50. That may be why they selected him. But reach out to your banker. Those of you who have private bankers, ask what they're doing, ask where they're at. And if you can get a line of credit, do so. Some of the banks are in good position. If they know you've been a good customer, they're going to work with you. They're going to do what they can to work with you. The next is we're starting to see some help from the government. Now, as of last night, we had a massive bill passed by Congress. I have not had the opportunity to review it and give you any feedback. The stuff that I do have feedback for you is things that are occurring that have occurred in the past couple of days. Most states, not all, but most states are doing some form of emergency loan to business owners. Now, in this case, Florida is doing a $50 million fund to loan up to $50,000 to small business owners. And it's basically an emergency bridge loan for people that have been impacted by the COVID-19 virus. So I'm not sure of the protocol. I know it's there. And I know it's out there. I was looking at some of the protocol, but I'm going to encourage you to check with your state to see what they have, because I'd rather have you have the $50,000, survive the 90 days, and then pay it back at the end of 6 months, rather than waiting the 90 days, realizing you need the 50, and then go through the 30-day, 45-day process of getting it. The new Sick Leave Act, which I put the link down at the bottom, and the IRS, in a shocking moment of business and customer friendliness, has put a whole link on coronavirus supported policies. And they're talking about tax credits for paid and sick leave. And this is very interesting. So if you've got anyone that's dealing with the virus, or you're dealing with any issues caused by the virus, which I think everybody is, and your employees receive up to 80 hours of paid sick leave, expanded paid child care, or had to provide child care when the schools are closed or child care is unavailable, where you supported them, you actually get a dollar for dollar credit back from the IRS for anything that you cover, including health insurance. You don't have a payroll tax liability in what you paid them. And you're treated the same for self-employment, which you're treated the same under the Act if you're self-employed. With a lot of the smaller solo practitioners are self-employed. So that is pretty cool and pretty unusual and very good. In short, though, it is a tax credit, and it's something that you'll deal with. So it's not going to help you with cash flow between now and today. And while you're exempted from the Act, you're still eligible from the Act, which is pretty cool. I did read this. This is something that somebody sent to me about Section 139 of the tax code. And this basically payments from employer to employee that should be treated as deductible and tax-free to the employee. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I found this to be incredibly fascinating as well. All I'm trying to tell you is that there's going to be a lot of amazing things out there that may be available for helping you as a law firm, as a business owner, or you helping your business owners when they recover from this process. It may not help you with cash flow immediately, but it may help you pay back loans and cash flow from this. And there's basically potential business interruption expenses related to COVID-19. So ultimately, it's basically saying that if you can track expenses, including time related to the COVID-19 issues, you can report this and basically have it work as a credit on your tax return. Now, I am not a CPA. I don't even play one on TV. I have been using the same CPA for almost 20 to 25 years because he and his firm are fabulous. So you're going to have to rely on a real tax advice of a real professional, not a lawyer that's playing one on TV right now. So I'm just hitting these things because they're there to help you. My point to you is that if you ever want to take advantage of this, my philosophy is you got to prove it or lose it. So if you're going to have to apply for a tax credit, you're going to have to start tracking the related expenses today, because it's going to be almost impossible to go backwards and capture that. So I would, if to the extent that you can, I would talk to your CPA today about some of these things I mentioned, talk about the COVID-related expenses, helping your employees during this time period should not result in you being punished from a tax perspective, which is a really positive approach and message that we're hearing from the IRS and the federal government, which I can't say has been a message that I've heard ever before. And I think you're going to expect more help and clarification from the federal and state governments as they try and help all of us work through this crisis. And just remember, when you go to file a year from now, you're going to hear me say, you're either able to approve it or you're going to lose the credit or exemption. Now, I'm going to mention a couple of things, and then I'm going to open up to any questions that I possibly can answer in the last few minutes of this. We're going to recommend that you stay informed as best you can. Mike Wells, who did the fabulous introduction of me at the beginning of this, is been doing a fantastic job for our company, and he has created a special website, a special landing page on our website at atticusvantage.com /what-we-do/webinars. And we're posting every single webinar that we're doing for the entire legal community to use any way, shape, or form that they want. These are three that I'm going to, or two that I'm going to point out to you. One is technology and optimization in the virtual environment. This was a couple of days ago. It was led by a fantastic lawyer by the name of Victor Medina. Victor was, up until recently, a fantastic, and I think he and Mark Metzger spoke, I think, about 10 years in a row at the ABA Tech Show. I could be factually fuzzy on that, but I know they've been speaking to the ABA Tech Show. Fantastic webinar. If you're looking at going virtual, or if you've already gone virtual, listen to this webinar, because Victor is on the top of his game and incredibly sharp guy, and has shared his knowledge and some of the things that he's done, including how to, we call it computer hygiene, and a few other things. They're just absolutely really thoughtful. Two, Mark Powers, who is a marketing guru, the founder of our company, my dear friend and partner, did a fantastic webinar on protecting your marketing pipeline and preparing for deferred demand. And that was taught 2 days ago. If you get a chance, listen to that. Mark is a gifted marketer. He really is. And he's a good guy. So he's putting his best ideas out there. And then, of course, this presentation that we're doing will also be reposted for you to listen. I apologize to the extent that I couldn't get into all of the elements of the cash flow crisis. The process I've designed is really designed to work over a 30, 60, 90-day program. 30, 60, 90-day process. I could probably teach it over a 1 to 2 day program, but I try to hit the highlights as best I could for my brothers and sisters of the bar today, to help them see what they can do today to the best they can. So once again, that's at atticusvantage.com /what-we-do/webinars. And we're also trying something else. If you, anything that we see out there in the legal community, we are trying to push out to everyone the best that we can. So while we are not the greatest on social media, mainly because Mark and I are Luddites, and we typically have avoided really adopting social media in our own lives, but younger people on our team like Mike and a couple others are pushing us in that direction. I would encourage you to check out our Facebook, our Twitter, our LinkedIn pages, and see what other lawyers are sharing on those pages. Now, those of you are Atticus clients, there's a lot more stuff being shared in your group private Facebook pages, but that's where we're seeing a lot of things being shared. And we're opening up we have opened up a coronavirus preparedness hotline daily, and this is open from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern time. Sorry to my friends in California, but it is free right now. So that's the only thing I can tell you. It's worth getting up early to make the phone call. If you're having a crisis or emergency, it's a round table. And it's going to be led by Aaron and sometimes Sean McNallis, who's one of our founders and the driver of a lot of intellectual thinking and curriculum in our firm. And that's that information's up there. If you can't make the call, always email us at grow@atticusadvantage.com, and we'll do what we can to help you. And Mike's posting those up there as well in the chat box. I see them going. So final thoughts. I wish I had more time with you. I wish I could spend more time and help you. We have I don't know, in excess of 300 or 400 firms that signed up for this particular webinar. So my final thoughts are, first and foremost, take care of you, because your leadership matters and you matter, and your family is going to count on you, so you have to take care of you. Two, it is a cash flow crisis, is a cycle, and you have to appreciate the viciousness of the cycle, and you have to protect yourself from that cycle, and you have to learn from that cycle. Three, do your math. Figure out what you have as far as your financial cushion. Your variable is your WIPP. And so you look at what you've got in operating, what you got with lines of credit, what you got in trust, what you got in AR, and then you throw in your WIP, and that's pretty much what you got to operate for cash for 3 to 6 months. And then you have to make a judgment call. What do you think you'll have in new business over the next 3 to 6 months? And some of you will have very little, some of you will have something. And my experience has been, after any crisis like this, and you can see this happening in China. For you lawyers who are family law lawyers, the trend in China right now is the virus is under control, allegedly, and quarantines are being lifted. The number one legal trend right now in China is divorce. So apparently people that have been cooped up with their spouse for the past 8 weeks are coming out and immediately filing for divorce, which is pretty amazing. So, and pretty predictable, I guess. So you're going to see a lot of things happen. Two is you are going to be counted on. People are going to need your help. So when you come out of this, people are going to need your help to sort through the wreckage of what's happened to their life over the past 90 days to 6 months, and they're going to count on you to do it. So you have to be strong and ready to do that. Mike, with that, I'm going to stop, see if we can take 1 or 2 questions for the next couple of minutes, and then we'll call it a day.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. Here is, we have several questions come in. And first thing I want to say is, if we don't get to your question, I will make sure that Steve sees them and that somebody reaches out to you to get you an answer to your question. The main one I usually get on here are the slides available for download, and I put a link up to our webinars page. It'll be up on there by tomorrow afternoon, and you'll be able to download the PDF of the slides, as well as rewatch the presentation or share it with your colleagues. But see, the first question is, we are in a good position right now, and we're planning to pay down our credit cards so that we could apply for a line of credit. Do you recommend that, or should we hang on to our cash and not pay down the credit cards and hope that we can get a loan? We currently have funds in reserve to last for 4 months and anticipate additional revenue on cash settlements in the next 60 days.
I would keep the cash and keep the credit cards where they're at. Because if the bank doesn't give you a line of credit, you can't get the cash back from the credit cards. You can run up the credit cards again, but you can't get the cash back. And if you're working with a local bank, depending on the size of your line of credit, if you're dealing with a private banker, or you've got a decent amount of cash at the bank, or you've been doing a decent amount of volume through the bank, a local loan officer sometimes can have the discretionary authority to look at your finances, look at your credit, and actually authorize a line of credit within 24 to 48 hours. Now, that may have changed in some banks. I know Bank of America right now is doing a 45 to 60-day approval process, which is pretty extensive. I mean, it's pretty long for a simple line of credit. I think that's them just stalling personally, but in most banks, they should be able to authorize that quick. So I would prefer, if you're my client, I'm coaching you, I'd say let's get the line of credit, and let's make sure that that's good. And then if you feel comfortable when you get the line of credit, pay off credit cards. Right now, cash is going to be king. So that's a great question. Mike, what's your next one?
The next one is, I have 2 or 3 complex, messy, ongoing cases that will continue to produce revenue for a while. The receivables badly skew the overall fee per file calculation for the smaller cases. How do I calculate the average fee per file?
That's a great question. So we have one complex case, make sure I got this right, that will skew your numbers. Take it out of the calculation.
2 or 3.
2 or 3. Take them out of the calculation. So if you say, look, 90% of my cases are like this, but I got 2 or 3 really crazy cases, just do the calculation, take the 2 to 3 crazy cases out, the complex cases out, and focus on the average bread and butter cases to do your calculation. It's a great question. That's how I would do it. So if I've got a handful of bizarre cases, I shouldn't say bizarre, but not, like you said, complex and unusual cases, but the rest of my cases are bread and butter work that are fairly consistent to calculate, then I would take out the complex cases out of my calculation.
Okay, do you want to take one more question?
Yep, Mike, let's do one more.
Okay, this will be the last question, folks. One person says, I suppose we should be considering using our personal credit cards for personal expenses now too, or at least considering doing that. And how do we decide when to use our business or personal credit cards versus cash? Just use the credit cards now and pay off later, or question mark?
It's a great question. I don't know where you're at financially. I don't know where your firm's at financially. But if you can look at your personal savings and you can look at your firm savings and say that you're fine for the next 6 months without having to tap a credit card, then hold onto the credit card. If you're saying, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a little dicey, I'm okay with you running up a little bit of credit card debt and keeping cash on hand. I want everybody, as a company, we've really taught our clients to think strategically. During a crisis, you can't think strategically, you have to think tactically. And so I want you to think, what do I have to get through to get to July 1st? And then if July 1st is the wrong day, I guess we have to think about this lasting 6 months. But I want you to think about, how can I get to July 1st comfortably, or as comfortably as possible? And if you got to run a little bit of credit card debt, that's fine. You can run a little bit of credit card debt, it's fine. And then by the end of the year, we can pay it off. But I'd rather have you have the cash. I'd rather have you operating. I'd rather have you have strong, be able to put food on the table, than have a great credit rating. That's typically how I feel about it. Okay, Mike, with that, and I apologize, I normally would stay on, but I'm unfortunately back to back, and I'm going to call it for now. Mike will do whatever he can to support everyone on this. I hope everybody stays healthy, strong, well, and I just want to thank you for the work that you do for your clients. The reason I work so hard and Mike works so hard, we know you work so hard, and you're out there helping your clients. You're trying to make a difference for them. So do your best while you can during this crisis to make sure that you protect your clients, protect their confidence, and look out for each other. With that, everybody, thank you, and I look forward to talking to everybody sometime in the future on a different webinar.